All right, welcome to Tech Talk episode 2. I'm Ken LaRose here. I'm a delivery manager. I've worked as a product manager, business analyst, um, product owner, scrum master, a number of different roles, QA. I've basically done all the different jobs on a software team other than professionally develop, maybe dabbling a little bit here and there. Um, so yeah, I'm just giving an introduction to kind of some of my background and where I'm coming from here for any new viewers. And wanted to put together this channel to talk about just what it's like to work in the industry and talk with some of my friends and colleagues that I've met through my career. Been doing this for about 10 years now, so know a bunch of people, and I think that we can have some interesting conversations. And with that, I want to introduce you to a new friend of mine, Vincent Wellington. Vincent is most recently a delivery manager, but I know you also have kind of an eclectic past as well. So I'll turn it over to you. What's your claim to fame?
I don't know about fame, but I'll try. I'll try, Ken. Thank you. I'll try. Yeah, Vincent Wellington. Similar to you, Ken. There's just an eclectic history of just experiences, valuable experiences, and opportunities that I've really enjoyed. Be it from the product side of things, be it the delivery side of things, or just the project management side of things. And even like you said, they're dabbled in software a little bit. There was a role once where I was responsible for delivering solutions, be it visuals and charts and graphs and what have you, or databases, working with databases, SQL databases, what have you, just done in sometimes C# development, just dabbled here and there a little bit, always found success with whatever I've done. And so just be it on an agile team or scrum team, I kind of held each role there. But yeah, just all of that came with a lot of experiences and a lot of friendships and a lot of relationships that I treasure today. And I'm glad to be on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And most recently, we were working as delivery managers.
Nice.
And when we met, and I remember the first time that we actually met in person was during a kind of a kickoff for a new Scrum team, and we were planning out a kind of a greenfield project
Right.
and just doing the initial sort of story brainstorming for it. And I like to think that, game can recognize game. And when we were first chatting, you said something like, "Hey, what maybe we should try this idea for like eliciting some user stories." And I was like, this guy knows what he's talking about. Like a lot of times people will have some kind of bogus suggestions or like feel good kumbaya moment. Let's all have an icebreaker, what's your favorite movie stuff.
Oh,
But you had
goodness.
like legitimate skills right off the bat. So I was like, this is a good guy.
And thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you saw it that way. I was fairly new to the organization at that time, and I can't help myself. When I get it, I love the process of delivering software, of spinning up teams, identifying the important things, and and aligning people on the vision and saying this is what we're focused on and let's go get it, and bringing the right people together. And so when I was in that conversation there, meeting you and meeting everyone else, I was just fired up. I tried my best to uh, contain myself there, but there was just so much opportunity there, and I wanted to contribute in some way, shape, or form. And thank you for allowing me to contribute and throw those ideas out there. I'm glad they came across as good ideas, and you saw
Yeah.
that same recognizing game. But absolutely, I saw you there. I saw the way you were facilitating that conversation in that group, and I recognized that immediately. Like, yes, this guy, he knows what he's talking about. The 10 years in the industry that you mentioned earlier, that definitely shown. And again, I knew that you and I would have a lot of things in common, and I'm again so glad that our friendship and that relationship has transitioned and grown since that day. So again,
Yeah.
thanks for having me.
I've just started to get to a point, I feel like after maybe 9 or 10 years, where I started to actually drop the imposter syndrome feelings a lot too. Like I started to realize, I've done this before. I've seen a few things. I actually might know what I'm doing nowadays. When I first started,
Right.
I was terrified. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just gonna fake it till I make it.
Right. I mean, and that's the only way, right? It's the only way to be. You have to get your hands dirty, pardon this language there, you have to get your hands dirty. You have to just do it. That imposter syndrome, it hits most of us. I would say, I want to say all of us, but I'm sure there's some unicorns out there that
No.
have never felt imposter syndrome in their life, but it's real. And because software development or software delivery, it's a complicated industry with a lot of different ways to go about it, right? There's no right answer. There's no manual that tells you how to do X, Y, and Z, and you'll get it perfect. So you have to experiment, right? You have to try and what that unknown, the uncertainty there, the ambiguity there, you have every right. You're well within your right to say, do I know what I'm doing? I don't get this, and I don't want to lead people the wrong direction, what have you. So that imposter syndrome is healthy. It's there, but we can use it as fuel. I think what I like to see is when people have that, they use that as fuel to want to learn more because you don't know everything, right?
That's right.
That pushes you, that lights a fire inside you to say, okay, I don't know everything, but I'm going to push myself to learn as much as I can and be open to the fact that I don't know everything. That I think that acknowledgement of being open to the fact that you don't know everything and saying, I don't know, especially when you do that publicly in the team context.
Yep.
When you're in a meeting, be it as a scrum master, a delivery manager, or the product manager, and you're talking about something and you're out of your depth and you just have no idea, and people ask you a question like, hey, what should we do here? I think one of the best things you can ever do as a member of a team, especially as a Scrum Agile team, is to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And what that does is twofold, if not more. You set yourself for success in a way that you're not committing to something that you can't deliver. You're not faking it in a way that's leading down the team down a bad path.
Yep.
But then also, everybody else on the team now recognizes, wait a minute, this guy is like a leader on our team. This guy gives us direction. This guy or gal is the face of our team, the voice of our team. And if they're comfortable enough and self-assured enough to say, hey, I don't know, I have no excuse. I feel now comfortable. I feel empowered to say, I don't know either. And that's just such a healthy mindset in terms of psychological safety on the team, where now everybody on the team can say, hey, we don't know, but we're going to find out. We're going to put the time in to learn to find out. So that's something important that I want to put out there.
I think another thing that's really good for is helping to, especially when you're just getting to know people, establish some trust and also show maybe some deference, but just generally respect, I think is the word I'm looking for, of people having different expertise, because usually these teams are composed of people that have different strengths, and being able to say, that's not my strength. What do you think about that? And kind of like highlighting or putting the spotlight on somebody who maybe has that experience or skill, and recognizing, you are better at this than I am. That can go a long way, I think, to showing respect, because I feel like a common pitfall when you see conflict on teams is when people are not recognizing each other's talents.
Absolutely. Yeah, and spot on there. Those cross-functional teams, where you have technology, you have product with the business acumen, what have you. You have the design aspect. You have the scrum masters, the delivery managers, and deferring to each other and saying, I don't know, and let's lean on this person for that. Very healthy thing to do, and definitely you want to lean on the strengths of your team, and saying, I don't know, is a great way to go about that. And I think the most common way, and let me know what you've seen, but in my experience, that kind of deference usually comes up for me, usually when it comes to design. When you have a product designer on a team, and ideally you want to empower them to understand the problem space, understand the users, understand the use cases, and deliver a solution that's going to work best for the scenario that they're presented with. However, what I've seen a lot is that you have product designers on teams. However, everybody and their mother has an idea or has a vision as to how the product should look and behave. And it just becomes this never-ending conversation about button here, modal here, what have you. And it just never ends. When reality is, the product designer is there for a reason, right? We need to trust that person to make those decisions. And if we learn something as a group that this didn't work out, yeah, we iterate. But really, those cross-functional teams exist for a reason. You bring in different parts, different skill sets, and let those people flourish and work as a autonomous, self-organizing team.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I look for in a team's maturity is how well of an understanding that they have of each other's roles. Like, what does this
Mhm.
person do? I try to think of it as like a baseball outfield, right? There's clear responsibilities for everybody in the outfield,
Right,
right? And they know, what area of the field is your play. Now they're also functioning as a team. So there's this kind of like individual scope, there's this team scope to it. And when members of a software team start to understand that and they know to lean on, like, I have a agile practice question,
right,
I've got 30% stake in the game, but my scrum master has maybe 60% stake in the game.
right,
Or I've got product question, maybe my product owner has a little more ownership of that, and understanding how to let people play their role, what they're supposed to be doing, and allow them to do that without stepping on toes, without like just totally, throwing away any responsibility. Like, everybody has a little bit of skin in the game there.
exactly.
But I think that that's one thing that I notice where younger teams, I don't know if younger is the right word, like newer teams, people that aren't
Right,
familiar with each other yet,
absolutely.
they kind of struggle with that, and getting that delineation of roles and responsibilities is kind of one of the first cornerstones, I think, of getting a functioning team squared away.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's where I know sometimes this might be, depending on the size of the organization, the industry, and how they practice agile. I'm sure we'll get to that as well. But
Yeah.
that's something that it may seem like an expensive exercise in terms of spending time when you're first forming up a team, right? Understanding roles, responsibilities, definition of ready, definition of done, those type of things. You're going to cross those bridges sooner or later. You're going to inevitably cross those bridges, right? What is a story point? What is the difference between 1 point versus 3 points or two, right? You're going to have those conversations. The question is, when do you want to have them? And I would encourage teams, especially newer teams that are not familiar with working with one another, to have those conversations at the onset as the team is being formed as part of those ceremonies. And that's not something that I would encourage a scrum master to or a delivery manager to do in an hour. Um, People
Yeah.
are people. They're going to need time to get to know one another, get to know one another's strengths, backgrounds, and so dedicating time, if that's a week, if that's a week and a half, but maybe probably no more than 2 weeks, if you will, to really go through those exercises and ask each other those questions, so that when you hit the ground running, when you have your work ready, your backlog is ready, you have your priorities and initiatives ready to go, you're not asking, wait, who's responsible for um, code reviews, or who's responsible for code cutoff, if that's the thing you practice, what have you. You're really focused on the work and not so much asking questions about the how. You're more
Yeah.
focused on, we know why we exist, we know what our priorities are, and we know what each person on the team is responsible for. Now, let's go attack this
Yep.
opportunity, if you will. So yes, definitely, if an organization can afford it, that is something definitely that I think you and I both agree on, that invest the time in understanding those roles and responsibilities, and something like a RACI chart, responsible, accountable,
Yep.
consultant, informed, something like that might be something that I've used in the past as a effective way to kind of have those conversations.
Absolutely. I have, the more times I've done it, the more time I've scheduled for it, because like every single time it ends up being not enough time. So I think my
Right.
first time I did like a team norms thing, I booked like 2 hours. Totally not enough time. We ended
No
up having
way.
like
Really?
several rescheduled sessions,
Oh
and
man.
then I
Yeah.
would go to doing a half day. And now I'm trying to do, I don't know, just I think that it can get to be a grind. Like, sitting in those
Yes.
sessions for a long time
Yes.
can be bad too, but I don't know, I think
Yes.
maybe at least 2 half days, maybe more. I always err on the side of being really conservative with meeting time. Like, I try to minimize as much as
Absolutely.
possible, but
Absolutely.
I've always found that good discussion occurs in those, and it's
Right.
it's always pays dividends, so it's
Right.
worth investing in.
It's the my wife and I, we were having this conversation just yesterday, and it wasn't so much about agile teams, but just the value of communication. I worked for a good number of organizations, and I don't know if you've seen this trend as well, but whenever these organizations do like a engagement survey or a survey of just get the pulse of the workforce.
Mhm.
One of the top opportunities that always emerges from those surveys is we need to be better at communication as an organization,
Yeah.
right? We need to be better at communication. And it sounds simple, right? Because we communicate every day. How can one be bad at communication, right? But you and I have plethora of examples of organizations making changes and not communicating them soon, or not consulting people, or not getting the right people involved in those decisions making processes. But I'll bring it home and make it more tangible for folks. My wife and I were planning a trip to San Diego over the Thanksgiving holiday. And a question that we had that we were kind of stuck on was, should we get a car or not? Should we rent a car while we're in San Diego? We're going to be there for about 6 days or so.
Yeah.
Should we have a car? We've been stuck on this question for like 3 weeks. We've just been talking about it. We really didn't sit down and have a conversation. It was just more like, well, it'll be nice. Well, it wouldn't be nice. Well, here's parking and etc. What have you, the flexibility. So we just had these offhanded remarks to one another, but we didn't really sit down and talk. So it was last night. We sat down and I told her to grab a piece of paper, and I had one too. And we got these clipboards. And so I asked her, okay, so write down, I'm gonna time box this. Let's do 2.5 minutes. Okay, 2.5, right? Time box, right? It's amazing how when you work in software, especially when you're on the agile side of things, when you're doing Scrum, when you have the certain Scrum Master and Product Manager certifications, how you bring those things home. I don't know about you. Is that, do you find yourself doing that? You bring those
Oh,
things
it
home?
it totally spills over into normal
Right?
life. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. So so we time boxed it. We did 2 minutes and 30 seconds. We'll write down all the things that you want to do when we're in San Diego. And I did the same thing. And then we did them. So she had her vacuum, I had my vacuum. We didn't influence each other. And then after 2 minutes, we went through our lists. Okay. We identified the things that we did. There was commonalities. There was things that we didn't have on, we didn't have vice versa. And then it was like, okay, so now let's review. Based on the things that we want to do, is a car necessary? Then we did a pro and con, a T chart, right? A T chart for car, no car. And we learned, after like 6 minutes, we came to this conclusion that was just like mind blowing to the two of us, when it really shouldn't have been, but it was so simple. But we wouldn't have gotten there if we hadn't sat down and just had a conversation, right?
Yeah.
We talk about meetings being expensive, but I would make the case that bad decisions are just as expensive, if not more so, right?
Yeah, you're telling me.
Right.
Yeah.
So what we came to was, wait a minute, a lot of the things we want to do, we won't need a car for. We can walk, we can take the trolley, we can do these things without needing a car, a rental car. However, there's one or two things that a car might be a really good idea for.
Yeah.
So instead of car, no car for our trip, we decided that 80% of the time we're not going to need a car, but there's going to be a day or two in there that we will need. So it's kind of like this happy medium, if you will,
Okay.
that we landed on. And the reason, again, I'm going to come back to this, that it was a conversation, right?
Yeah.
We talked about, instead of just going in just like, oh, no, we'll figure it out later, or we don't need a car, or we do need a car, let's spend however thousands of dollars on a rental car for the full time that we're there. We had a conversation. We met, we took maybe 20 minutes
Yeah.
to discuss and came to a good solution that's going to work for us better. So I, respecting the team, the time of the team, absolutely critical. You don't want to have people in meetings. You want your developers developing. You want your product manager doing discovery and identifying market trends and opportunities. And you want your designers to be cranking out awesome designs. And you want your delivery manager to be keeping a pulse on things, make sure the team is operating efficiently. You want them to be checking dashboards and data and make sure that velocity and outputs are where they should be. However, setting aside time to be aligned as a team, to understand the value proposition, why we're attacking what we're attacking, how it rolls up to the greater organization's objectives, and how we're contributing to the needs of the business. Those conversations are critical. And again, time is necessity, but again, especially for those newer teams that don't know each other very well, you have to have those conversations. You need to set aside the time for them, because they're going to happen. And the question is, are they going to happen in the middle of your sprint, or more of, are they going to happen in a scheduled, structured way, if you will?
That's right. Or in your retro.
Oh gosh, retros, man. We could talk about retros for hours. Those things are they are an art and a science. They are something unto themselves.
I think so. I used to be a retro, not respecter, I guess. I used to think retros are like, whatever, skip it, who cares, and that was a big rookie mistake for me. And I started to realize how valuable that they were. Not when, and here's the reason why, is because when I would go to retro, all that I would see was gripes and like comments and like kudos, which this is fine. Like kudos,
Right.
I'm not the touchy-feely guy, so some of that stuff, like it's totally fine for most teams, but I'm kind of like, okay, like you did your job, great, great, like it's wonderful. But I wasn't getting any good outputs from the retros. But when I started to see a couple of times it would happen, like it would strike on lightning, was where people would say, oh, this handoff between devs and QAs is not working.
Right.
Let's talk about it. And then we would drop the topics. We'd be like, okay, we've got 50 sticky notes, drop them. This is the problem we've got. Let's talk about it. And we would talk about it, get an actual new plan for how the team's going to operate for this one local area, and then we would implement it immediately, and then the team is working better. And I'm like, holy cow, that is the continuous improvement that people pay a lot of lip service to, but that's an actual practice, is when the team actually looks at, hey, this is our pain point, this is how we're going to solve it. They solve it themselves too, which is the crazy thing. I mean, I kind of feel a little like, what am I doing here? Because they solved it themselves, but it's having the wisdom to help to facilitate that, or sometimes to kind of like prompt that conversation to happen, I think is where you earn your paycheck.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, well said. That is, if anybody listening to this right now is not sold on the value of retros, then hopefully this conversation convinces them otherwise. It's a key part of the agile way, the lean scrum teams. Agile, if you consider yourself an agile practitioner, you need to be conducting and being a part of retros for your team, because that's really where, like you said, that's where the team practices that continuous improvement, that time for reflection, that a time where, like Jeff, your previous guest, mentioned about empathy. I think there's no greater place to show empathy as a agile practitioner as the retros, where you're not, we've all seen this, and the retros, you're not there to attack one another, right? You're not there to gripe about this other department, this other team, unless there's really nuggets of opportunity there where we can improve something. Really, there's teams where I've seen where they fall into that habit where it's just a complaining session, right? But no, at the end of the day, we are here, our jobs, we are being paid as adults to deliver value, right? And retros are just another avenue of delivering value to reflect on the past sprint, reflect on our practices, reflect on our roles, responsibility, our norms, our team charter. Are we living up to the values that we want to, that we've established for ourselves as a team? And so that retro, again, as scrum masters or delivery managers, whatever your organization calls them, absolutely, the way we get our paycheck is by providing and creating a safe space, a space that is conducive to problem solving, to empathy, to teamwork, where together you work together to identify things that you can improve as a team. And really, when it goes well, when it's being facilitated well, and when the team has bought in to what a good retro should be, I don't know if that's where the wins come from, right? That's where the wins come from. And you see it, and you see the team begin to rely on each other and work together. And again, it's not about tearing each other down or saying this person didn't do that, X, Y, and Z. It's, you understand that there's a flaw in the way that we're going about things, and we see opportunities. It's like an opportunity session. What are opportunities that we have, in framing it that way, and make sure you're going inside with the mindset of assuming positive intent, right? That's something that I always like to lay out for my teams that I work with. When we come to retros, leave everything else at the door. But when we come in here, we're assuming positive intent, because we're all invested in being the best version of our team as possible. So no, you cannot. So again, those listening, please, if you consider yourself an agile practitioner, make sure you're having those regular retros. They're invaluable.
Yeah, for sure. You bring up the topic, you kind of mentioned them together there. Scrum Master and Delivery Manager. How do you think about those two roles? Do you think of them
Man,
as distinct? Are they
man.
the same thing? What do you think?
You know, you and I, we've both been in this industry in terms of in the business of delivering software, be it as a developer, as a product manager, as a scrum master. You and I both have had the privilege of operating in kind of all those roles in a way.
Yeah.
And the scrum master one, that's one where I am still kind of I'm struggling with that in terms of understanding, depending on the organization. And I hope this is not considered a hot take, but within context, I want to make sure that there's context here that not every organization, maybe this is more about agile, but not every organization needs to be an agile organization, especially if
Yeah.
you're not a software as a service organization. If you're not an organization where the software is first, where you're not delivering products and releasing product increments on a biweekly or sprintly basis. If that's not you, you may not need an agile team.
Yeah.
Maybe you just need your developers to sit with the marketing team or the finance team, and they have a dedicated developer that works on things, or two developers. Maybe you don't need a whole team with a product manager and et cetera, et cetera. And so just the question, I was something that I hope that some of the viewers take away from this is that, and the listeners, is that for your organization, when you think about agile and scrum and delivery managers, product owners, what have you, ask yourself, do we need this? Does
Yeah.
this align with our business, our processes, and where we want to go be 5 years from now? Asking yourself that question as an organization, because a lot of times when I think organizations, when they think about agile, is, hey, agile, one of the principles is like welcoming changing requirements. That sounds awesome. As a business, that sounds awesome. So
Sure.
our developers and teams are going to have to be adapting to change all the time. Yay, that sounds awesome. And also deliver frequently. Yay, this sounds
Yeah.
awesome. Yes, we want to be agile. Sign us up now. Let's hire a scrum master, maybe an agile coach, a delivery manager. Okay, cool. We're
Right.
doing agile, right? We're doing agile.
Right.
But in fact, that is not agile. In fact, I would say a lot of times when we talk about agile, we talk about agile teams. However, I think the conversation should now transform and escalate to when we're talking about agile organizations.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Agile is not just a team mindset, it's a mindset that an organization needs to adapt. Because if you have an agile team and then a non-agile, or whatever you want to call that, waterfall, top-down organization, then there's a disconnect there. And that
Yes.
disconnect, what you see there is going to be waste. You're creating waste in that disconnect. That is waste. And as an organization, there's no time for waste, because you know your competitors, they're moving fast, they're young, they're scrappy, and they're moving quickly. So the waste that you created there, yourself, you've created it. The market didn't create that waste. You have, as an organization, because of that misalignment. So that is something that I encourage organizations to really scrutinize. What works for us? I'm not saying that agile is the end all be all, because it isn't. I have qualms with agile. You and I, we talked about this at length. However, organizations should be very careful when they say, we want to hire a product manager. Well, then you need to understand what a product manager is supposed to be, what they're empowered to do.
That's a really good point. Understand what those job titles are. Don't just sign up for it being like, well, everybody else has them. Because a product organization is a thing that is, that's so beautifully put, Vincent, because when I think about a scrum master, and I'll use this as the example, it works for any of these roles though, is the scrum master can teach a software team scrum. And quite frankly, it's not that hard. You know, it doesn't take forever for the team to get scrum down. And because they do it every day, it's like learning a board game. You know, we can read you the instruction book, but let's play a few rounds and now you got it, right? The team is actually playing the rounds. It's everyone around the team that struggles to learn what is the agile way, what does it mean, how does it work? And that's the toughest part. And I think that the biggest thing for a scrum master, and it's ironic that they get embedded on a team, a software team, when really their biggest value that they can be bringing is probably coaching up and out around the organization. And it's about, you know, I don't know, it gets overlapping a lot with, ultimately, in my opinion, helping business decision makers to think about how do we prioritize all these things that we want to do?
Yep.
What's realistic about what we can actually feasibly do? What has to hit the back burner?
Right.
Because, you know, that's the actual name of the game. And that is when we
Yeah.
talk about avoiding bad decisions, you have to, you know, not making a decision is also a bad decision. So
Absolutely.
what are you going to focus on? And I think that for me is what Scrum Master evolved into Delivery Manager in a lot of ways. But I'm still on sort of a one-man war against the world here to try to convince people that that's what delivery is. Like that's where it's the best value is being provided, is really being a bridge outside of the team as well.
Hmm.
You
Right.
know, and that's
And I
it's
don't think
tough.
you don't have to fight that battle by yourself, Ken.
Yeah.
There's a growing school of thought that's emerging as of late. I would say the past 3 years or so, called product operations.
Ooh.
And Melissa Perry has a book out coming out has a book out right now that dives into that, about product operations and the role that they have to play there. Because again, on a Scrum team, again, for the right organizations, if you're a product organization, software as a service, where the software comes first, and you're focused on delivering value increments on a weekly or bi-weekly sprintly basis of software, then product operations might play a role where you have people supporting product. You are there to support the product, be it QA, release teams, scrum masters, what have you, so that you can empower and allow product managers to focus on value, not the day-to-day minutia of backlog refinement and creating user stories, what have you, things that don't really deliver value. But we really want our product managers out there to be finding opportunities to attack, if you will. And I think so. It's not a one-man war. You
Yeah.
have allies out there. People are really big names in the industry that are saying that there is a way we need to rethink the relationship between product management, scrum masters, product managers, and the rest of the team there. So absolutely there. But I would say, in terms of in scrum masters or delivery managers leading up and how they can lead an organization, that's where they talk about leading without authority, right?
Yeah.
And that's hard, especially when you're trying to lead or coach up your managers, even your own manager or directors. You're the scrum master, and yet here you are having to explain to a director or a VP the agile way, the agile manifesto. And at some point, I think something that all of us come to a conclusion on is, okay, how many battles should you fight before you realize that this organization is not going to be an agile organization, or is not ready for that? They're not in that growth cycle. They're not going to be a agile organization to follow the best practices to empower themselves to be successful. Because at that point, even if you can coach up, you can be polite, you can show all the data, what have you, but if the organization is not ready, they're not ready.
Yeah.
So then the question is, what are you doing, right? Why are you there?
Hold on to that thought. I'm gonna have to send you a new link. Our meeting's gonna run out of time. All right, we're back after our commercial break there. I've got a
Yes.
free Zoom cuts you off at 40 minutes. So, you know, but we were just
Are we
talking about, oh, go
We're
ahead.
gonna thank our sponsor, Ken. I think it was Raid Shadow of Legends. Thank them for sponsoring this. Is that the sponsor for today's
Yeah,
episode?
yes, exactly. Tank Wars or whatever. Um, yeah. Uh, you were just talking about what basically, and hopefully I'm paraphrasing this well, but you were just talking about when do you realize if the organization is maybe not receptive to doing agile necessarily, and now you've got sort of a unique landscape on your hands.
Right.
Yeah.
That's tough, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know what your advice here, and that's, I think, depending on where you are in your career and what your goals are for professional development. But if you are in an organization in a scrum master or delivery manager role where the organization touts itself as agile, um, and your goal is to grow yourself as an agile practitioner and become an agile coach and what have you, whatever that career path looks like, you have to ask yourself, hey, if my roles and responsibilities basically boil down to running stand-up and running retros,
Yeah.
and communicating velocity, which I think for those of us that have done this job, communicating velocity is a uh, um,
I would call it a Sisyphean effort.
I mean, there's a chart, right? You can look inside any project
Yeah.
management suite, and they tell you right there what your team's velocity is for the whatever sprints, what have you. So you have to ask yourself, if you love that organization, if you think there's value in continuing to scream into the void, if you will, in terms of just ruthless prioritization. I think you mentioned this, Ken, in terms of like organizations. The best organizations, and I will summarize this here and let you weigh in here, Ken. It's from my perspective, the best organizations, whatever they call themselves, Agile, Lean, Sigma Six, what have you, they are very good at prioritizing the things that matter, the things that are going to make an impact, and they empower their teams to focus on those things.
Yes.
Because at any point in time, as a software team, especially software as a service, you have a buffet of things you could be working on, be it technical debt, what have you, customer requests, stakeholder requests, and then just product initiatives that you need to get out the door. And you can't do all of them. You cannot. And the organizations that recognize that and say, look, we can't do all these things. However, the things that we're going to invest in, the things that we want our teams to be focused on, are going to deliver a return on investment that's going to allow us to grow as a business so that we can attack those other things, right? And the best organizations, they have done the discovery, they have done the research, and they have done the work to understand what those items are. And then they put those teams to say, hey, we know you're hearing all this noise, but we're going to isolate you, not in a bad way, not in a silo. We're not going to put you in a silo, but we're going to isolate and protect you from that noise so that you can focus on the things that we know are going to return value to this organization, the most value. That's what the best organizations do.
I couldn't agree more. I've seen it a lot of times where technology ends up being a significant factor in the actual strategic direction of non-tech organizations. And I think the reason is why is this, and it comes from a principle that I learned actually just doing art as a hobby. I used to go take lessons in drawing, and I would do these charcoal figure drawings and portraits, and my teacher would always give me a certain time limit. So draw this portrait in 5 minutes, draw this portrait in 20 minutes, this one in 30, and when you do that over and over, you start to realize when I'm doing my 5 minute, I have to drop like all this detail. I'm going to try to get the general like outline and gesture. I might block out maybe just only the lightest lights and the darkest darks of the shadows. And then that my 5 minutes is up. 20 minutes, I've got another level of detail that I can actually start to render, and so on and so forth. It's a freedom that comes from clarity on the constraint. And a lot of times in organizations, there is no constraining principle on the business side. They're like, these are all the things that we want to do. And it's not necessarily what is gating the feasibility of your ability to execute on that. A lot of times it is your output of your technology teams that are dependent on to do it. And so it becomes, when you are prioritizing what technology work gets greenlit, you force decision makers in the business side to think about what do they actually want, what do they actually value. Like you had said kind of earlier with your story about, hey, what are the things we want to do in San Diego? Do we need a car or not for those? Sometimes getting to that next level of detail and the feasibility of it is what helps to drive true decision making. And so I think that, just to reiterate something that you said, the times that I've had in my career that were the best, when I felt like I was delivering value, that my team was doing really good work, are when we had clarity on what is it that we're trying to accomplish here, and what is priority number one. It's when that becomes murky and you're not getting a clear vision, or you're having fence sitting happening, that it becomes really difficult, and then like office politics starts coming into play and all the ugly stuff that follows that. And so it becomes difficult. I think that one of the things that is tough to do is trying to reach out, like you said, communication. Do you have the ability to reach out to your senior leaders and kind of have a
Absolutely.
conversation about that candidly? Because some places you can't even get a phone call answered, and other
No,
places you're not allowed to ask that question.
right.
But in an organization when you can, and usually I find those are a little bit flatter on their managerial hierarchy, or at least culturally so. Um,
Exactly.
you have a healthy discourse, and I think that it helps to really keep key decision makers in touch with what's really going on, boots on the ground there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that, I mean, this is no surprise, but you and I, we often see eye to eye more often than not. And
Oh,
and when it comes to the best organizations, absolutely, it's that ruthless prioritization. And the I don't know, I have some ideas as to why organizations struggle with this, but there's a boogeyman out there that I see a lot in organizations. They're afraid of their competitors.
mhm.
They're afraid of their competitors that are either more funded, better funded, younger, they move faster, deliver faster, what have you, all those things. But I think the real boogeyman that organizations really do fear is that those competitors that are actually solving user pains,
Mhm.
that are actually delivering value to the user, that they understand their users, they understand the market, and they're not focused on anything other than solving user pain. And again, this is where, based on the organization's maturity, the industry, the growth of their company, and all those things, how saturated are they? What does their product offering look like? But the companies that they fear, which again, we're going to say are the companies that we admire, are the ones that are just saying, look, this is the job to be done. This is
Yeah,
the problem we solve for our users. Everything else, that's a nice to have. Well, we're focused on the real thing, and that's how you convert users. That's how you poach customers from your competitors, because they're
yeah,
saying, hey, yes, you have a solution for my need, my pain, my problem. However, these guys, they're solving it in a way that I didn't even know was a problem for me. They
yep,
didn't just they didn't just listen to me as a user and just build what I wanted. No,
mm,
they actually solved the problem. They did the job to be done. One of the organizations I'm going to shout out that has them, that I think does a really good job of trying to align with what users actually need and trying to align themselves to key product principles, having a flat as much as possible product organization, and more, very importantly, focus, giving teams the space and the room to focus and breathe on the things that matter, is Quantum Workplace. A former employee of mine, I've been very impressed with the way that they do product and build product, in terms of just being able to talk to the VP of what have you, or being able to talk to the CTO about opportunities that you see, and just having that dialogue, and really their approach to a product and engineering. They're not two different departments that have different goals and agendas and what have you. No,
yeah,
I've seen it. In fact, they share an office. The chief, the CTOs, the head of product, and the chief technology officer, they share an office, and they talk to each other more than anybody else in the company, because again, they are a team and they work together. So again, and
yeah,
they're focused on the things that matter, the most important things that matter, and they also do that to shelter their teams and make sure that their teams have that focus there. So
yeah,
absolutely, you love when you work for those type of organizations. And again, I'm going to reiterate, the companies that all these other companies fear, it's not, they don't fear them because, the real reason I would wager is not, they don't fear them because they're better funded. They don't fear them because they get the best talent or what have you. What they really fear is that this organization, these scrappier, young, startup type environments, they have actually honed in on the job to be done
yeah,
for their users. They've honed in on that, and they have allowed themselves to focus. They have allowed themselves
yes,
and their teams to focus on that job to be done. And that is what those organizations fear, which is why you see some organizations, they spin up these innovation um, um, teams where they're like separate from the company, and they get to focus on problems, because it's hard when you're a mature organization to move
yeah,
quickly and adapt to market needs. But I think that's what they really fear, is those companies that are able to adapt quickly, but also they've allowed themselves to focus on a core problem and do it and solve for it really well.
for sure. And the customer focus is really that, right? It's that customer focus. I I think about a couple of things come to mind. One that is not business related, but it makes me think of going to the gym. You know, like I'll go to the gym and work out, and I look around. You know, I go to like a powerlifting gym, and there's a bunch of like
Right.
really huge, strong dudes there. And I look at people, you know, squatting 500 pounds. I'm like, oh man, I wish I could do that. I feel like I'll never be able to do that. But
Right.
what at the end of the day, it's like you just need to go and do your workout. You know, you need to go and do your training for that day. Do what's in front of you. And I think that's the thing is it's like the avoiding the one hard thing that you need to do,
Yes.
which is to
Yes.
solve a problem for your customer. It's hard to
Right.
do. That's why so
Right.
few people succeed in it, but it's a lot easier for us to like, you know what? I don't know how to solve the problem for my customer, so let's go throw bells and whistles on the same old thing.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
do this other procrastination, and
Yes.
and that's why fearing the better funded organization is maybe a false fear because it's very easy to squander money. It's very
Exactly.
easy for you to take VC funding or whatever or sell yourself publicly and then just like blow that money on stuff that has no return on investment.
Feature factories, right? Feature
Yeah,
factories that we
yeah,
we see it all the time. That's why, because you and I, again, we've had a ton of experience in this industry, 10 years each. I've come up with these 7 principles that no matter if I'm serving as a product manager or a delivery manager or a scrum master or a program manager, these 7 principles or 6 principles, if you will, they keep me grounded on what matters, and they are alignment. I want alignment on my teams. I want alignment between teams, that, even teams that I don't work with, and alignment with my leadership. I want that alignment at all times. I would say I'm desperate for it, and I'm
yeah,
ferocious. I want that alignment. And if you can't get that alignment, you're going to see that that's a leading indicator, I would say, of turbulence down the road, right? And be it one of those roles, you want to protect your teams. Yes, the scrum master should be protecting the team, but guess what? Also, the product manager should also be protecting their teams. Program managers should be protecting the teams. You want to protect your teams no matter what those roles are, but also then alignment and clarity, right? And I'll say those 2 things go hand in hand. Give teams and departments clarity in terms of what you're chasing and why we're chasing those things. I think a lot of times I see organizations, they bemoan the fact that engineers are asking questions. Well, just
yeah,
do what we ask. Why are you asking all these questions? And it's like, no, you don't want these mercenaries. You don't want mercenaries working for you. You
yeah,
want these people to be empowered individuals that ask questions, that push you to be better, to actually explain the why, right? That 5 whys exercise. They want to know so that they can also contribute, right?
yeah,
They're not asking because they don't trust you or what have you. But if you're going to change requirements on a dev team, which happens, it's the nature of the beast.
yep,
They just want to know, developers and design, what have you. They just want to know that the business has done some due diligence
mhm,
as to why that change is happening.
yeah,
It wasn't somebody woke up and said, you know what, I want to go this direction. They want to know. They want to know that yes,
and the
somebody somewhere did
context.
it right. Exactly. They want the
Yeah,
confidence to know. And so they're going to ask some questions. And when you build that rapport, when you have that relationship where they know yes, people are putting thought into these things. I promise you, any organizations listening right now, that you're going to find that your developers are going to be they're going to be bought in. They're going to iterate quickly because they know that these iterations lead to success, which leads to being able to their paychecks, job stability, paying off their mortgage, paying off car notes, what have you. That's what those lead to. So alignment, clarity, I would say efficiency. That's a principle that I strive for in my organizations or my teams that I work with. Let's be efficient, right?
yeah.
Sometimes people mistake agile for waste. Just move fast, break things, and don't worry about it. Once we IPO, somebody else can come in and fix the mess. No, let's try to be efficient as possible. Let's not be wasteful. Right? Ruby on Rails, for example, if it's not a scalable platform, you're not going to scale with Ruby on Rails. So maybe make the investment in a proper
Yeah.
architecture there initially. A bias for data, right? There's tons of organizations.
Oof, that's a
This
big
is
one.
such this
Yeah.
is such a I don't know if you remember back in like I think it was maybe like 2000 between 2014 2017 there was this term just buzzing around software shops where it was big data.
Yeah.
Nobody could stop talking big data.
Yep.
And I kept on hearing that term. However, nobody ever really gave me anything tangible. Okay, what are we doing with big data? What does it mean? How are we acting on big data? Nobody was saying that, but they're all saying, well, big data is changing everything, or we need big data, we need big data. But what are you doing with it? What do you need? What problems are you going to need to solve?
Yeah.
And it is just now that I think with AI and machine learning and generative AI that we're seeing that data, big data being used to create things. But really, the best organizations, again, other than prioritizing, they have data that influences their decision making. They have a pulse
Right.
on the organization, on the business, the process flows, where those opportunities are, where those bottlenecks exist, time to market, all of those things. The best organizations, they have that data readily available and they consult that regularly. I'm gonna follow up with the last two principles, being transparency, being transparent within your teams and across teams. Just putting your cards on the table and say, hey, this is what we're working on. This is what we have, and we can't commit to more than this, and here's why. When you explain to people, when you give stakeholders and partners visibility into your backlog, into your sprints, etc., they very quickly come to the understanding, oh, wait a minute, this team is tapped out. They can't do anymore. So instead of asking, why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you doing more? Well, here you go. Here's our sprint. Now, if you believe that there's something more important for this team to be working on, let's hear it. And make sure that, exactly, if you want to bump something out, that's fine. But make sure that your peers, if you're the director of marketing and you want to bump out this work, make sure that the director of finance is also aware, and the two of you have that conversation. I think that's one of the things that a scrum master, a product manager, a delivery manager, a program manager has a responsibility to do in terms of providing that transparency across the organization, so that people know when we ask these teams to work on things, you have to prioritize. It's not all, it's not a buffet for everyone, right? And then last but not least, camaraderie. We know that we want to build healthy teams. We want to build teams that enjoy working together. And those red tools are, again, a great way to do that and facilitate that, but also taking time, especially in a remote working environment where we build those relationships, take time to just have social hours and just hang out, play games, whatever. There was a product manager that I used to work with, a really good guy, really great product manager, one of the best that I've seen. And it was Graydon Hudson, and he would have, like, I think it was like monthly game nights, board game nights, virtually. They'll play Jackbox games or what have you with his team once a month, and that was just another great way of building bonds and what have you. But just the camaraderie aspect is one thing that I also would encourage Scrum Masters, product managers, delivery managers, program managers to invest in. So those are 6 principles that I think, no matter which of those roles that you operate in, and I think even developers, if you're the developer, I would say that pushing for alignment, pushing for clarity, being efficient as possible, having a bias for data, being transparent, and facilitating camaraderie upon your team is just a beautiful thing to do, and I encourage that.
Yeah, man, those are all crucial.
That was a soapbox there. Forgive me, that was a bit of a soapbox.
I think so, though. But those are like those will be good to have like on a poster on the office wall. You know what I mean? Just as kind of a reminder, because you know it's one of those things that it's easy, even if you're focusing on 4, you could be sleeping on 2. You know, like you have to stay vigilant and take the time to sort of health check those things too. You know, if you're running too fast, you can lose sight of some of that stuff.
Right. I have not done this yet, but it's something that has crossed my mind a few times, is during the red drills, because I could easily see these principles being a team norm as part of a team charter. When you have a team norms and the team signing up and saying, yes, we're committed to these principles and more. I would encourage keeping that number smaller than larger. But during each red drill, maybe having a poll just saying, hey, on a scale of 1 to 5, how committed do you think our team is to our principles? And then going to each one, do you think this team has alignment? Do you think this team has clarity? Do you think this team is efficient on 1 to 5 scale, or on a 6-point scale, what have you? Do you think this team has a bias for data? And then via the red fill, you can ask, okay, if we're scoring lower on an area, why? Why do we think we're not living up to this principle that we committed to as a team? And then having that conversation there. But yeah, I think that's a great call on your part in terms of just having those things be visible and putting them up somewhere so that it's kind of like the Nebraska football team, right? Before every game, they tap on a horseshoe, right? good luck, what have you, and they tap on the door.
Hopefully, hopefully it works one of these days. We'll see.
But hey, Matt Rule, it looks like he's turning the ship around. It looks like, I mean, it may be too early December to knock on wood here, but we're seeing some progress there. Like, I think we have a good record, and it looks like we're in contention to win the Big Ten West. So that's not that it's not a great year for the Big Ten West, but we're in contention between Nebraska, Iowa, and Wisconsin. Nebraska is in contention to win that Big Ten West.
There you go. We'll have to see what happens there. I don't know. I'm not the biggest football fan myself personally, but I've had to check out a little bit more than usual in the years of late, living in Nebraska here. So.
Dude, Ken, you don't have to explain. I think every Nebraskan can relate to the fact that we've all kind of for our mental health, for the sake of our mental health, we've gone into hibernation the past. Mileage may vary, but probably maybe 5 years, because the news have not been good. The product on the field has not been good, and we've had to, for our mental health and well-being, we've had to just take a step back and reevaluate what you do on our Saturdays in the fall. And so nobody blames you, but I think we're charting in the right direction. And next year, hopefully, we have we have a more than a winning record, because we have that now, but really. Something that we can be proud of as Nebraskans, right? Something we can be proud of. Yeah. There was something that Jeff, back to product, if you will.
Oh yeah.
Jeff, your guest last episode, he mentioned talking about realities of the job of a product manager.
Sure.
And there's a few things there, and we talked a lot about software delivery organizations. We talked about Agile, what have you, and something that we talk about for the product managers watching this and product leaders. Like, I don't know, you and I both have served as product managers, but I don't know if there's any lessons learned that you have, or things that you're like, hey, yeah, this is something that if you're going to be a product manager, if you've never served as a product manager before, here's something that you need to know. And I think Jeff, something that he said that I definitely 100% want to piggyback on, is that the reality of the job of a product manager, and this probably goes back to prioritization again, ruthless prioritization, but you're going to be saying no, or ideally, or if you're doing the job well, if you're doing the product manager job well, which it may not feel like it because it's hard and it's painful, you're going to be saying no a heck of a lot more than you say yes. And I'm almost inclined to say like a 70-30 split, maybe even 80-20 split. If you're saying no to yes. If you're in a software organization where software as a service, software first organization, if you're doing the product manager job as most software organizations are structured, then yes, you're going to be saying no a lot more than yes, and that's just a reality you have to be prepared for.
There's always more work than there is capacity to complete it, but even to bring back part of our earlier conversation, if you're doing your job well, you have a focus on your customer, and you have a clarity on what it is that you actually want to achieve for them. And that it's not so much a no, so much as a sorry, but we're doing this, so there are lots of things. Everybody's got a great idea. But here's the question is, does your customer like that idea? Is that what the customer wants? And my advice, I think, for product, newer or veteran, is be scientific.
Absolutely.
One of the things that was a huge benefit, I mean, I as like my career, my education and university was rather eclectic. I bounced like 5 different majors, but one of them was pre-med, and so I had time in the lab with chemistry and physics and stuff like that. And being able to structure experiments where you isolate variables and understand, when we move this variable, this is the reaction that occurs. Understanding the mechanics of your product and your business model is a thing that is achievable. And it goes back to the big data thing. A lot of organizations, they caught the buzz. Data is really cool. That is really cool. But you have to be able to structure things scientifically for the data to have any meaning.
Absolutely. Actually, I mean, taking big data into something actionable is an exercise, right? That takes time, and it's an exercise. You have to commit yourself to that. From data to actionable data. there's a distinction there. There's a very powerful distinction there. And so, yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
So you think that the new feature is going to really do a lot for your product? You think it's going to increase your conversion rate? And then you go ahead and you invest heavily in this project, and then you do it and you roll it out, and then you're like, well, the numbers went up. Was that because you released that feature, or was that
Right.
because the economy got better, or
Exactly.
is it the season? You don't have controlled variables. And so A/B testing, figuring out ways to make small experiments that you get an
Absolutely.
actual logically sound conclusions from,
Right.
that I think is a oft neglected part of the craft. And quite frankly, I mean, and this is pretty tough, but from what I've seen in the field, a lot of times companies are just so focused on staring at their roadmap or their OKR
Gosh.
spreadsheet that they don't even look back to see if the
No,
thing that they did had the
no,
result that they expected. They don't even look
no,
at it.
no.
They just do it, and then they're on to the next thing. And so, are you learning is the other part of it. I think that, one thing I've learned to value is not just, and this is at a microcosm, on a project level, a feature level, at a
Right.
sprint level as well, is not just what software did you make, but what did you learn about your customer. If you didn't learn anything about your customer, dig a little deeper and see if
Right.
there isn't a way you could be doing that agile practice a little bit better, because hopefully there's something in there, a lesson learned. That's the gold. That's the true gold.
Right.
Yeah.
Dude, absolutely. Absolutely. That the you're saying underutilized or under appreciated part of the product manager role, and that experimentation, that and it's a shame that that is underutilized or underappreciated, because I would argue that should be like 40% of your responsibility.
Yeah, it definitely
Conducting
should.
experimentation and thought experiments, that is absolutely a core aspect of the role. And uh and so I have like, I think there was nine. I have nine um product learnings that I would share with anybody that wants to get into product management. And experimentation takes up two of those nine bullet
Yeah.
points, in terms of just things that I encourage every product manager to be aware of. If you're new to product, or even if you've established, these are things that you should be adhering to, or trying to follow, or keeping in mind, things that you should keep in mind as a product manager. But even what you just said in terms of just the learning, you need to have validated experiments, validated thinking. And absolutely, Eric Ries, the guy who kind of set up the storm of build, measure, learn, right? Even when, I don't know about you, but when I did my Agile certification, I asked, okay, so this lean thinking, Agile, waterfall, etc. Like, what's the big deal about Agile? What's so important about it? What makes it different? And the instructor, I'm sure I annoyed the heck out of him because I asked a ton of questions, but he got to the answer that I was looking for, which was, in Agile, unlike most other frameworks, you come back and you review what you just did, and you take lessons learned from it, and then
Yeah.
you apply that to the next increment.
Yes.
You review, you do the work, you review what you did, you take lessons learned, and then you apply it to the next iteration, the next increment. And that was the key missing feature from all these other outdated frameworks. And that just blew my mind, because it was common sense. It's how humans operate. It's how we learn how to ride a bike. You
Yeah.
get on the bike for the first time, you fall, and you realize, okay, I need to balance better. It's just how we do things. You do something, you reflect, and you try it again. And so Eric Ries, when we talk about build, measure, learn, it's not just Agile. He's saying you build it, okay, you measure the results of whatever you build, because you had an experiment, you learn from it, and you apply it to the next one, and you keep on iterating. That's what iteration is. And I think what you're striking out there, Ken, is that organizations do not iterate. And when they do, the time between iterations is so long, you've probably lost people that were part of the original iteration, and that data is now no longer valid, because the market has changed in such a way. And so
Yeah.
when you say we iterate, it's kind of like a joke in the industry. We'll iterate on it later. We'll iterate on it. But
Yes.
you're losing the value. You're losing the value, because that's what it is. if you're not iterating quickly and conducting these experiments, these thought experiments, these A/B tests, these Wizard of Oz experiments, then you're losing the value. You're just starting from scratch over and over again. So absolutely, I love that you hit on that. I love that.
Well, Eric Ries, right? I mean, it's been a while since I read that book, but if I remember correctly, he was on a team that was basically, they were trying to make some kind of like virtual, I don't know if it was virtual reality or not, or it was kind of like
It was a
avatar
robot
type like community thing, and they were like just experimenting with the market, right? And that is sort of product management in its purest form. I feel like a lot of times, you know, what product managers should be, what should not be, are like super experts who are geniuses that sit in their office and they know the industry and they're going to dictate what needs to happen. They need to be people that understand a craft of, like we said, admit you don't know. You want to know what your customers are thinking of, or what you don't even realize yet yourself. You need to be a learner. You need to figure out, how do I poke the market and get that feedback in a meaningful way so that I'm learning, what do people want? What do people need? That's how you develop products. That's the actual craft of it. It's not about a silver bullet genius idea that you come up with yourself. It's an actual practice and a process. And yeah, it's something that you can very easily do waterfall 2 weeks at a time. That's a lot of places do, you know. But the question of it is are you figuring out how that worked and then responding to that data that came back, the feedback loop.
Absolutely. You know what, I think you helped me land on an insight here, Ken. And this is one person's opinion here, but I would almost say that the product manager, the most critical skill or most important skill for a product manager is you need to know how to ask good questions. And if you don't, you need to become comfortable with the journey and the path that it takes to ask good questions. That's asking questions of stakeholders, partners, and most importantly, users. Users. You need to learn how to get people to open up to you, asking them the right questions, and so that they can be vulnerable. The best product managers, they can do a lot of things well. Yes, design theory, speed to market, data on a total addressable market, total available market, what have you. They have all of that. That's great. However, if your product manager doesn't know how to ask the questions, the right questions at the right time, there's an opportunity there. There's waste there, because that's what you want to be doing. They need to be asking those questions, and you want your product manager and ideally your product designer, those two as a tandem. And if you want to include the product, the tech lead, that product trio, these are people that are really good at asking the right questions of stakeholders, partners, and users, especially users. So no, absolutely, I agree with you there. I agree with you 100%. The product manager, that's something. If I was just to distill it into a sentence, what is a good product manager? The person that you know is going to be asking all of the questions, but most importantly, the best questions. They're going to ask the best questions.
You're curious.
Because that's going to guide them on their discovery.
You're curious. You know how to elicit, and eliciting those things. It's almost like and sometimes it's asking the question you know the answer to.
Absolutely.
It's guiding the other person on the thought train that you're trying to lay, because it's a skill that works when you're doing discovery, but it's a skill that also works on the delivery side when you're looking at teams. How do we get you to operate? Well, you know, I've had 11, 12 Scrum teams under my belt by now. I have to go back and count them now, but I've seen a bunch of different things. And so when you get the next one come under your wing, you're like, I know what you guys need to do, but I need you to realize what you need to do. And so it's like, how do you elicit and get those right conversations going to help people see things as well? Those are also important skills. So yeah, it's a way more of an art than a science.
Absolutely. And that role is definitely art, science, but that the ability to ask good questions at the right time of the right people and knowing who to ask those questions of, definitely a table stakes skill for a product manager.
Yeah.
Now, you and I today, Ken, we talked a lot about good organizations or better organizations, what have you. And I will say again that it comes down to, and I don't want it to come across as looking down upon organizations or anything along those lines. However, when you are a part of an organization that is aligned and focused and that's prioritized, you feel it. And everybody on a ship, to borrow a phrase from your last episode, rowing the boat in the same direction, right?
Yeah.
When you're a part of that, it feels great. And
Yeah.
the results usually show up for it in terms of just revenue, AR, what have you, and profit margins. You see that because everybody is working towards something that the organization has done the research to say this is the right direction to be rolling in. But I also want to make sure I said that a lot of organizations are going through that transformation or that change, and they need to ask themselves those questions. And it takes time. You and I have never started a business. We've never run a business. And so there's some things that we don't have visibility to that kind of force the hands of organizations where they're trapped inside these mindsets and these behaviors that may not be serving them the best. But I think that's where people like you and I, because we have these years of experience and from different organizations, different teams, that we can come into an organization and perhaps it's not even necessarily at the team level, but maybe whatever that looks like, but to help organizations reevaluate their processes. Agile, is it what they need? Is Kanban versus Sprint, which don't even get me started on that. I will save that conversation for another one. But spoiler alert, I'm on Team Kanban as of late.
Everyone loves Kanban.
I mean, you can still learn from it and iterate, just like Sprint. But I think Kanban's gotten a bad rap the past couple of years. But I think schools of thought are changing towards Kanban. But again, we'll save that for another episode. But I do want to say thank you, and I just want to say that organizations out there, for organizations that are watching and listening, really scrutinize your processes, your industry, your teams, and ask yourselves, the way that we're organized, does this suit us? Is this the best way to get value out of our teams? The way that we're structured, the way that an organization is structured tells you a lot about it, and also tells you a lot about the focus of that organization. And so that's just something, before you bring in an agile coach or a scrum master or a product manager, understand that those roles carry with them responsibilities and skill sets. And if you're not going to leverage those skill sets and not going to empower those individuals and teams, really reflect if you need if you need to be an agile organization, or if you need product managers, delivery managers, what have you.
Very well said. We're coming right up on time here, man. So maybe we'll wrap it up. But thank you so much for coming on the show.
Ken, thank you for having me. Look forward to the rest of the episodes and appreciate this, man. Thank you. Look forward to joining you again, hopefully in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye, Ken. Thank you.